Heavenly Father, please just speak through us on this podcast. Please direct it in whatever way you want us to go and guide our words, Lord. You direct the conversation. This is your podcast. It's not mine. I surrender it to you. It's completely in your hands. And thank you for this opportunity. And we just pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Welcome back to At the Barn, where we discuss impactful testimonies from influential people. This is your host, Isabella Kakady, and today we're at the Root Brands with Clayton Thomas. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. This has been a long time in the making.
Yes.
Many conversations have led to the opportunity to sit down, so thanks for having me.
So I have so many things I want to talk to you about today because I honestly think you're such a fascinating person. But the first question I really wanted to ask is, what's it like being married to the most brilliant person we know?
You know what? It's actually a true statement. The interesting aspect of divinity is knowing that there's a matched soul, that you're, as a man, that you're made to serve, right? And I think the important part is taking the time and working on yourself enough and being patient to allow yourself to become not even the best version, but the process of working to be ready for the opportunities that God's going to provide you. So when you look at the relationship that Christina and I have, and most people will look at us and go, "Oh, you guys are like oil and water," mm-hmm. Which is not true. We're like oil and vinegar. Because when you take those two substances, and people are like, well, those are the two opposites, which is very true. But when you take them and you shake them up really good and you create a lot of friction, it makes one heck of a salad dressing. Mm-hmm. Right? So, it's the important part of relationships, of knowing the power in mutual talent, but also, as a man, what I've learned is men being a former athlete, being someone that was highly competitive even up into college, where I was in a sport that breeds the most arrogant breed of athlete ever made, sprinters. Mm-hmm. And so as men, we look at what we do, right? It's all about us typically, because of the testosterone and the ego and stuff that comes with it. But the greatest strength, I think, in men is to be in a position where you find a partner and you find a wife that is stronger than you are, and you do what you can to allow them to be the best versions of themselves. So if we look at it like with animals and dogs, one of the ways that they will a lot of times show strength or submission is to roll over and show their belly. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's like, okay, I'm submitting. And that's often not just a sign of weakness, but a strength. And so having someone, like Christina, that is so unique, that is a literal savant, mm-hmm. That BC, so before Clayton, there was a prophecy put over her that she was put here to heal people in a war on healthcare. And knowing that you've got this mission, but it's not just hers, it's ours. Because I know I have my part in that, and part of what I've gone through in my career was aligned perfectly with what hers was. So when we were even introduced on the phone and she said hello, it was the second time in my life that God tapped me on the shoulder and said, that's who you're supposed to serve. You can't fulfill your mission without helping her fulfill hers. Yeah. So you can look at it of she is the savant, but I'm here to help her do what she does and do my part. So it's the fun part of knowing, she's the smartest one in the building, mm-hmm. and I try to be top 3. Yeah. But it's a lot of fun. But I think the important part in this, and especially for young people, is understanding that there's this level of genius. When she was at Johns Hopkins, she was an adjunct professor in oncology and hematology at Johns Hopkins, and they figured out that she's an idiot savant, but she's social, right? So she's like Rain Man, You guys wouldn't understand, but Goodwill Hunting, right? She's a level of genius that you rarely see in humanity, but when you do, they're not functional in society because they're so smart. But she's an idiot savant, but she's social. But one of the most common things that we talk about is she can never find her phone, right?
Yeah.
So it's finding and creating that balance. You know, so the important part in relationships is patience, right? There's the exploration aspect that kids will go through, and when you're youthful and whatnot. But really developing that discernment and the spirituality, because when you find, that one, and I would argue there is one, because I was married for 14 years before and had some interesting experiences within that, and so was she. She was married prior. When you find that one, and it's incontrovertible. How's that?
That's great. So you would say you believe in soulmates?
Absolutely. I think that we have a creator, right? And you can't argue that. You can't argue, and people that want to argue evolution are making the wrong argument. They're asking the wrong questions, and they're actually looking at the wrong things. But when we look biblically and we go back, it's like God made Adam and Eve. Well, that's a matched pair. Yeah. So to think that scenario isn't also something that's done for each of us in this world, if we've done the work to become, ourselves in a process and way that we were created, then you're going to find that. But if you don't, you're not going to find resonance. You're not going to find the resonance for that. You might end up on OnlyFans. Yeah. Don't go there.
That's so interesting, because it's like we have to be who God intended us to be before we can find who God intended us to be with.
Yeah, because my favorite author and philosopher wrote that we are each an imperfect piece to a perfect puzzle, right? And through that, I think now in this world, especially for our younger generations, is there's so much that's presented, and you might look at a sculpture, right? And if you go to the Vatican, you might see some of the most amazing, or in Italy, you go to Florence, and you'll see sculptures that have been there for hundreds or thousands of years, and you look at the finished masterpiece, and you're in awe of that masterpiece. But because of the presentation of stuff that's put in front of you, you might forget that started out as a raw piece of rock, and the time and the work, the effort, the detail, the sacrifice that it took to create that masterpiece. You're not born a masterpiece. We are born with a patina. We are born into a toxic soup. We are conceived in a toxic soup that is creating this burden on us. So when we're born, from the day that we're born, that process begins to work to become your best self, right? And that's where, the cleansing aspect is not just a spiritual component, and it's not just washing your hands and washing feet, but actually doing that, molecularly, throughout your entire body, because we are physical, we are spiritual, we are psychological, and we are emotional, not all independently, but simultaneously. And you have to be cognizant of all of those things. And when you're doing that, then it's almost like you have free will, but God's always got a hand on you, And it's the adage of, the old story of a guy walking on the beach, and, Christ was walking next to him, and then in times of turmoil, he looked back and he said, there's only one set of footsteps. Why weren't you there with me? And the answer was, I carried you.
That's good.
Don't think it was you the entire time. Know that there's always a hand on you, right? There's always going to be a presence there to guide you. But you have your walk. It's your responsibility. It's your sole responsibility to become your best self, and only through that process and that investment. It's not about what other people think of you. It's not what other people look at. It's not your job to be like anyone else, because that's the deception game of, follow all these people on social media and look like them and be like them. That's the flaw, because the beauty in the design of the entire ecosystem is that each piece is unique and it has its connection points, and we are not made to connect to everyone. We are made to become our best selves, because if you've ever played with a jigsaw puzzle, you got all these pieces, and sometimes if someone's played with it before, some of those pieces are bent. Some they're all turned over in different ways, so you've got to figure out, okay, I've got to straighten them out, I've got to make sure that their edges are clean, and then when you start turning them all over, you're going to start seeing where pieces go. And if you don't do the work to set up the board properly, you're never going to get to a conclusion, and you're never going to see where things fit. And it's kind of the same basis.
I love that talk about comparison, because I feel like my audience is a lot of younger generation, and comparison is a topic that's not talked about enough. And like you were saying, it reminded me of that Bible verse, we're all one body, we're one body of Christ, and each of us are different members, and we each have different purposes. And I think that that's so good, and we need to talk about that more.
Well, and one of the big things, and I had someone in the office earlier that we were going over this. I think one of the big flaws is, people want to look at and segment different religions, right? You want to, and because of the environment I grew up in, my mom grew up in an alcoholic Catholic household, my dad grew up in an alcoholic Protestant household, and when I was a kid, they were like, "You're going to figure this out on your own, right? You have your path." And we would always talk about spirituality and at the dinner table, along with health and nutrition, because I grew up in an integrative veterinary practice. But around the age of 12, 13 years old, and having those conversations, it's like, okay, if I'm going to understand theologically and spiritually who I am, I need to study everything, right? And the beautiful part of truth, right, is no matter where you go in the world, no matter what religion you want to study or compare, everyone knows Christ. It's an absolute. But the key is in understanding that regardless of what your theological belief system is, we all come from the same source. There's only one creator. We all follow that same approach. It's just some of the messaging has been construed or is delivered differently in different regions. And I think, and this is the one part, for you guys, as some of these younger generations, because there's a lot of old souls that are in young bodies right now. And it's going to be your playing field very, very soon, right? You guys are going to take over and be like, okay, we're in charge now. So how are you going to do that? Because it's not siloed. Mr. Beast is?
No.
You're the one that doesn't. So he's the largest influencer on YouTube and social media, and they got, I think they're up to 385 million followers now.
Wow.
And, so I've been working with their nonprofit side and the foundational side, and I was chatting with them. I'm like, what are your demographics? Because I thought it was just kids, like young kids that are watching this. Because when our youngest two were younger, they were watching, and they're like, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. And their primary audience is 65% of their audience is between 18 and 40. And I'm like, you guys control the future of humanity, with your messaging. And they understand that. They understand the impact that they're having on their audience and what they're teaching and the principles that they're teaching. And so it's really important to ground yourself in your principles now and understand who your maker is, where you're from, and to begin to take the time to understand why you're here, right? Because that's going to lay the foundation for everything else. Because if you don't develop it when you're younger, it's a lot like training and muscle development, right? If you're not insanely active as a kid, whether you're a guy or a girl, the activities that you do will vary, right? The sports, the activities, the things that you'll do. But if you don't do the work when you're really young to create the muscle, right, and develop the connective tissue and the muscle, that later on it's very, very difficult to do so because your body's no longer in that mode. And so being able, to be really young and start to dive into understanding your faith is something that's really important. And working the spiritual muscles as well as the physical muscles is crucial. And because while you might look at yourself as being insignificant, right, because of all of the noise that's going on around us, and it's having a teenage daughter in this world is so important, because there's so much being put out that's designed to take over your mind, to get you to not become who you're divinely created to be.
That's the enemy.
Yes. And it's designed to take you away from that. And so many people are falling into the trap, right? And they come into the thought process of, well, I'm not good enough. And, oh, maybe I don't need to be here because I'm not like a Kardashian, or I'm not like Taylor Swift, or I'm not this. How come they have all these things? When you don't understand, you are this masterpiece, and the restoration process, because of this patina and all this stuff that's been put over you since you were conceived, is a process to clean up. And sometimes those that you see in the media are maybe not as cool as you think they are. Maybe they're greatly filtered.
And the whole point is to be individual.
And that's just it. Unique. We are each divinely unique, and it's crucial that you create your uniqueness, because eventually you're not made to please everybody, right? You shouldn't. When I was growing up, I had like 12 friends. That was pretty much it. Now people are like, oh my God, I need to have 100,000 followers. No, you don't. Be you. You'll find your tribe, and you'll find those people, because at the end of the day, as you mature, you might look to have all of these people that like you or watch you, but when it really comes down to it, you'll have a handful, and you're good, because you don't need a lot more than that.
Going off of that, what's your take on influence today? And a lot of people my age want to be influencers, but I think the true influence is being an ambassador of Christ, and I just wanted your point of view on that.
What does influence mean to you? And why are we both wearing gray corduroy?
I don't know.
Did we send out a memo?
I guess so.
It's amazing. So what does influence mean to you? In your age group, what does the term influence actually mean? Let's define the word, because there's another word that coincides with influence that is actually what people think is influence, but it's not. So let's define one, then we'll define another, and then we can go. So what does influence actually mean?
Well, what it means to me is probably different than what it means to people my age, but I would assume people my age would think it means like you have power and you have control over the thoughts of others, and you have an effect on what they think.
Okay, which is good. So you have, and we each are divinely powerful, right? Because of who made us.
Yeah.
So influence, it's not about power and control per se. It's the ability to have impact, right? So you can use words like discipleship, right? And how important it is to use influence properly. But the one thing that I've seen and I've learned is when most people say they want to be an influencer, what they're actually saying inappropriately is they want to have a large audience, right? They're like, oh, I want all of these people to follow me. Well, that's an audience.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you have influence. And I'll give you a couple instances. We have some friends here that have been on television shows, right? That were on really big television shows when I was younger. That the teeny boppers and young 20s and people were watching. And one of the ladies is here. She's got about 4.5 million followers.
Okay.
She's an influencer. But when we were working on collabs, she was telling us, oh, this is what companies pay me because I'm an influencer. But when you look at the data, the only reason people pay attention to the content that she's creating is when she's showing off her boobs or showing off her butt. That's not influence, right? Because if she puts out real content, or if she puts out something that isn't just the appearance part, people don't engage with it. That's not influence. The real aspect of understanding influence is knowing that you're not made to have all of these followers, but you can impact all of them because we're already all connected. We're 6 degrees from 6.5 billion people, right? Because social media has connected all of us, right? And just time and the way that the world is now developed, we're already connected. So from a business perspective, marketing can and should be done different than it has been done. Companies should invest in people because it's people that provide influence for companies. And that same thing goes in understanding what it means to be an influencer. That if you have 10 friends, or if you go to the barn and you've got 100 people that show up, right, for those 100 people, if they all came together and said, okay, here's the message, here's the mission, we're all aligned in this, you can take over the world. Especially with where we live, right? This was one of the big things in creating the business model that I did with Root, was understanding we didn't need to leave our area code in order to touch everybody on the planet, because the people that are here are connected to everybody, right? So when you understand what your real influence is and what it means, it's having an impact on those that are close to you. And then allowing that resonance of that impact, allowing them to share with their communities, and that's going to spread. That's impact. That's like Christ-like.
Yeah.
Right? That's what that means. He had 12 disciples. He had 12 homies he rolled with. Did he go, oh, yeah, I need to have 100,000 people watch me and follow me and this? No. He's like, I got my homies. We're going to go do some cool stuff.
And then he sent them out.
Yeah, and said, hey, go do your thing. And look at what's happened.
The whole world. Yeah.
Yeah. They like, everybody knows who he was and what he did. That's influence.
Yes.
Right? Not audience. Because he's not here to talk anymore. Doesn't have to. Because what he left, what I like to say is, if you're an athlete, what you put on tape, right? I did it. I performed it. It's the same thing for performing and singing, right? If you go drop an album and you go to the recording studio, you lay down a track, and you're like, oh, we crushed it. We're going to cut that, put it out. It's on tape. It's not going away. So people can go, that's outstanding, and they're going to share it. You might not cut another album, but you did that. And people, oh my God, I heard what you did. It was so amazing. It touched me in this way. That's influence, right? That's influence. And you only release it to a couple of your friends, but then they're like, oh my God, everybody's got to hear it. That's how the game works. It's not about having everybody follow you. It's about what you do to have an impact on those that are close to you, and that's going to allow you to have an impact on everybody else. Yeah.
That's great.
That
was amazing.
Cool.
That was perfect. This is going great. I was thinking that we should talk a little bit about the Root products, and because a lot of a lot of the people listening are very interested in health and wellness, and so I was thinking you could talk a little bit about maybe dopamine and the and maybe the impact of zeroing and how that could help college students.
Oh my Lord. Well, one, as a former college student and as a former college athlete, there's a couple aspects. Sleep is the most important thing, and we don't get enough of it. We don't get the quality sleep that we need. And here's a secret, because I actually did this in college because I was an athlete, so I was training constantly, and I've always innately known I need to get my 8 hours of sleep, because genetically, because we have a genetic test that actually shows this, but I know I need 8 hours of sleep to be good.
I need 10.
Right? And you know that.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is when you're in school and maybe you've been sitting in class and you've got a test coming up, people think that, oh my God, I have to cram. I got to stay up late. I got to study, and I got a test in the morning. So I'm not going to go to sleep. I'm just going to study all the way through and go take the test. It's the absolute worst thing you can do, because you'll just bomb the test, because sleep deprivation happens really, really quickly. And if you're sleep deprived for 24 hours, you start to go psycho. You actually go crazy, clinically crazy. So your cognitive function decreases, and that's not good. So you've got to be cognizant of how valuable sleep is. And some of my friends, like when we were in school, we'd be sitting in some of our anatomy and physiology classes, and we'd have a test. And I'm an auditory learner. And so I learned how I learned really quickly. So I would sit in class, I'd make notes, I'm listening to everything the professor's saying, I'm cross-referencing it with some of the materials. But outside of class, I didn't really have to study because I already took in everything that was going on. So when it came to test time, all my friends are staying up late. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to bed. I ate dinner. Peace, I'm out. I'll see you in the morning. So we go to class the next morning. They're like, I'm worn out. And they're all angry and take the test. I score better than they did. And they're like, you didn't even study. I'm like, well, I did. I just did it different than you because my brain's processing everything while I'm sleeping, taking into account what I've already put in to be ready for the questions that are going to come versus putting all this extra stress on a process that at the end of the day is really not that important, really. And that makes a huge thing. But when you look at how Zero In is constructed, we have a gas tank, right? And we have this amazing motor and, an operating system that's running this vehicle. And your gut is that fuel tank, and that is the motor that will feed your heart, your pineal gland, and your brain. And so dopamine and serotonin are the two, and you can throw norepinephrine and stuff in there too, but dopamine and serotonin are the two most powerful neurotransmitters that are produced. And we chase them, right? And, businesses have learned so well how to create things in the environment that ping dopamine receptors that just give you a little dopamine hit so you want to keep doing them. And sometimes food, activities, exercise, they do those. Video games, cell phones, apps, they'll all ping dopamine receptors. Do you know why you get notifications on your phone?
Why?
Because it pings a dopamine receptor. Because you have your phone and you get a notification and your brain's like, oh, there's more fun. Oh, there's another one. Is it necessary to go, oh, ding, 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 ding? No, it's not. But they know in creating that app that if they do that, your brain's going, oh, there's enough. Oh, there's enough. Oh, there's more excitement. Oh, maybe it's about me. Oh, maybe it's about me. Oh, I saw this. And it's influencing your brain. Whereas if you take the alternate route and you feed your gut what it needs to allow your intention and your brain to dictate what you want to do. So you've got more serotonin, so you're relaxed, you're calm, you're smooth. And then you've got also the dopamine, so you can hyper focus in whatever you're doing, but whatever you want to do, you have more endurance, you have more focus, it's fun, even if it's something that you really don't want to do. Like if you needed to clean the bathroom. I've got so many people. One of my buddies, when we first launched it 5 years ago, I sent him some samples. I'm like, bro, try this. And he's in California. And he called me the next day. He's like, bro, I took 2 of those things last night, and I cleaned my kitchen and my bathroom and my living room with a freaking toothbrush. And it was amazing. And I have house cleaners, and I detailed my kitchen and my bathroom. I don't do these things, but I had fun doing it. I know. I was like, hey, I just need to do this. This is amazing. He's like, this is different. He said, then I went to sleep, and it was outstanding because the interesting part in our design is these neurotransmitters are adaptive, right? And your brain needs different amounts of different components at different times. So during the day, you want more dopamine. You want to go work out, you want to be in class, you want whatever you want to do. You need to be, locked in, you want to be able to have fun. But at night, you want less dopamine and more serotonin. Because the serotonin will actually, if your pineal gland is working the way it's supposed to, and that's the light center of the brain that controls your circadian rhythm, but also connects us to our source. If it's working properly and you have enough endogenous natural serotonin is converted into melatonin. You don't need a gummy. And if you have extra serotonin, it converts to DMT. So you don't need mushrooms or psychedelics. It's actually done endogenously when we're working the way that we're supposed to. So the combination of those two helps you get into deep REM sleep, which is where your brain can detoxify itself and relax and recover and process everything from the day, and you're going to problem solve. And so a lot of people, when they talk about dreaming, they might have lucid dreams. or you'll know what you need to do tomorrow or what you're working on, and you'll actually work through all of that while you're asleep. So it's like Inception, right, the movie, where when you're asleep, you're creating, but you're also creating while you're awake. And so the zero in is crucial for all ages. But if I was in college, oh my God, I'd be popping it like Skittles.
It's changed my life. Like, I just have sustainable energy all day long.
And when you look at the cost and you look at the comparisons for what kids are going to the street for to get Addy and Vyvanse, or kids that have been prescribed Adderall and Vyvanse and all these other different meds that are horrible, right? With our youngest son, with Kreider and his friends, some of them that have been prescribed Vyvanse or Adderall, and I'm like, tell me about your experience. Like, I hate it. I don't want to be on it, but I'm addicted to it because I was given it to as a kid. And, it's really expensive. And a lot of kids are going to the street, right, buying pills off the street for $5, $10, $25 a piece to help study. But we also live in an environment now where you can go to the street and you don't know what you're getting. Like one of our family, really good family friends, and one of Kreider's best friend's brother, who was a couple years older than he was, did the same thing. He was at the University of Tennessee. Comes from an insanely prominent, successful Christian family, and had trouble sleeping, so went out and bought a Xanax from a kid on the street. Got 10 times a lethal dose of fentanyl. Didn't wake up.
That's awful.
And you know the song 21 Years by Toby Mac?
No.
You not heard it? You might want to listen to it.
Okay.
That's why. It was his son. 21 years old. Was going to change music. He was blending, because he's Toby's son, right? So you've got huge Christian music star, one of the biggest in the world. Son was blending reggae and hip-hop, and that influence, and right at the point where he was going to break out, because he has just dropped his first album, dead, because he went to go get something off the street to sleep better.
It's terrible.
So for $20, it killed him. And you go, well, that was a waste, right? And to be with his family and my kids and Kreider's his younger brother, and to be there, especially at his funeral, and to be standing next to a casket for a 21-year-old kid that's got a 17-year-old brother, and go, this is not your path, right? And so being able, one, to have a process with Clean Slate, with Zero In, Restore, with Relive Greens, with Give Me Back My Youth, these components that are designed by a nanobiotechnologist, by a literal savant, as we touched on, which is fortunate for me as I married her. Yeah. But that's intentionally created these mechanisms to allow the body to become what God's intended it to. But when you look at Zero In, something that is so impactful, so inexpensive. It's $1.60 a pill. So you can't argue with, oh, I'm going to go get this. No, it's less expensive, it's healthier, it's cleaner, it's better. If you take more than one, it's outstanding. Like if you're a college student and you're not young and you want to go out and hang out, you're going to go to a party, take a few of them. Take 2, take 3. But in those, especially for women right now, because we live in an environment that women get taken advantage of. Whether it's getting roofied or someone's feeding them too many drinks, or you get a little bit out of control and you don't have your focus, and you can end up in a situation that is not conducive to your well-being or your longevity, because of all the sex trafficking that's going on, especially here in Nashville. The kidnappings and stuff that go on. That's legit. That's not a joke, right? So you have to be cognizant of those things, but you want to be able to have fun. You want to be able to get all this stuff done. Being able to do it naturally is something that's really, really important.
And can you explain how Root has the value of faith involved?
Look at our logo, right? So I think there's symbolism in everything, right? The other side, the deceiver, the devil's aspect is to use symbolism. So you have people doing all the different stuff to show their affiliations. When Christina and I were developing the approach to create Root, she can remember being 5 years old and having a tea party as a kid and have just herself doing her tea party, like you do. And she can remember sitting on God's lap and him having the conversation with her that she was his child and she's good. She's got a path and that he's got her.
That's beautiful.
And part of that deal was that through her career she was going to give away half of what she made. And so when we came together in that journey, knowing what her mission was, what the prophecy was over her, that she was put here to heal people in a war on healthcare, and then what my mission's been and what I've known I was put here to do, and knowing that she wanted to give away 50%, but if you look at it from a business standpoint, and your dad knows business pretty well, that in any business, you're going to spend 40 to 50% of your revenue on advertising and marketing in order to keep turning over money and growing sales and growing revenue. And you continue to spend and spend and spend. But what if you change that approach? What if you didn't spend it on marketing and advertising? You said, great, you know what? The key of what your principles are. I have 3 principles that I primarily live by. WTH.
Walk, teach, heal.
Walk, teach, heal.
Can you explain this?
Yeah, because those are the principles. Because to me, that's Christ-like, right? That's what, if everything you want to study in biblically, and you go through the stories, but if you try to break down what Christ was, and if he was going to teach a class, right, to 5th graders, he said, what does it mean to be Christ-like? Yeah, because he's like, I want you to be like me. And you go, well, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. He's like, well, these are the 3 things that I do. You go, oh, okay, I can work off of that. And so it was through those that we built the business model, the approach. And then, because of the symbolism, you've got to have a logo for a brand. It was, okay, well, how do we show people subliminally, a lot of times, what our foundation is? So we put a cross in the middle of the logo and said, well, we want to name the company Root because we need to get back to our roots. You want to find the root cause. And then it was a matter of, okay, well, how do we design that? The interesting part, from an advertising and marketing standpoint, one of Christina's best friends that she grew up in college with for 7 years is one of the top creative directors in the entire marketing industry, and she's in New York. So because we're family, you're like, hey, Susan, this is what I want to do. Can I get your help? And I got the family discount, because what would have cost a company $500,000 cost me $50,000.
Oh, wow.
just to create the logo. And the important part, if you're studying communications, you're studying marketing and branding, how difficult it is to create something to be iconic and really clean and really simple. It is really hard to get something really, really simple and clean. It is a process. So when you look at the Root logo and you're like, oh yeah, that's really cool. How come no one ever came up with that before? I have no idea. But guess what? That's how it ended up. So you want to put your money where your mouth is, but you also want to be able to show people your faith and where you stand without having to say anything. That's the walk, right?
Yes.
And it's like, people are going to look at you and go, I understand your principles just based on how you are. Now, I'm a little bit more brash, a little bit more outlandish, and some people don't like my tone, but at the end of the day, when you judge the actions, you go, oh, I didn't like your tone, but I get it.
Yeah. You look at their fruits.
Yeah.
You see what they get out of things.
And that's just it.
Or you can wear a Jesus hat.
And it doesn't hurt.
Yep. Right?
People go, what's that mean? It's like, who's your daddy? Yeah. You can't say that. Well, I just did. So, what we got?
So this next one's kind of, I guess I would say, controversial, and I haven't heard anybody else talk about it, so I was kind of wanting to hear your take on it. But
Okay.
I know you've talked about it a little bit in recent videos, but what's your take on how do you view being on the spectrum and how it can be a superpower?
I actually just recorded, they're cutting this right now. I recorded this yesterday. So it'll be on TikTok shortly. What does the spectrum mean to you?
I honestly don't know much about it. I just know that
So everyone's talking about being on the spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when they talk about the spectrum, they're saying, oh, you're ADD, you're ADHD, Asperger's, autism, right?
Yeah.
That's the spectrum that they're talking about. That's not the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
We're all 8 billion of us are on a spectrum, right? The important part is to understand where you fall on this spectrum. So the spectrum really, if we look at it, goes from a complete invalid to an idiot savant and everything in between. And in the middle of that, you have aware. So you might have, to the left side, ignorant, dumb, stupid, idiot, invalid. Going the other way, you have aware, intelligent, smart, genius, savant, idiot savant. And on that line, so that's the x-axis, on the y-axis, you've got high functioning and low functioning. And the key part in understanding in this spectrum is people are going to fall in different areas of it. And this is the key part. So like if someone was diagnosed with autism, that they're probably going to fall somewhere in the genius to savant realm of intelligence, but they're blocked, right? So in some aspects, they're low functioning. But if you talk to parents that have kids that are autistic, and I've done this a lot in my career over the last 20 years, and we actually have been able to reverse this. But when you talk to parents, or let me rephrase that. When I talk to parents of kids that are diagnosed, or maybe they're nonverbal and they have these complications, and people are like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, your kid is autistic. I ask one question. I'm like, what's their genius? And you know what every parent knows? What that is.
Mm-hmm. That's so cool.
Because they're like, oh, my kid does this, right? And it could be piano, it could be mathematics, it could be all these different areas. Because the interesting aspect of the influence of mercury on the brain, because mercury and aluminum are the causes of autism and ADD, ADHD, and how the brain will rewire based on the configuration of the toxicity that exists within the environment. So you can look at autism and Asperger's and stuff, especially in the nonverbal group, of having like a glass wall that's been put up. So you've got this functionality that's taking place here, but there's some disconnects, and they're screaming behind this glass wall, but you can't hear them, and they're banging on the glass sometimes, going, "Let me out of here," but it's not getting out to the rest of the world. So when you start to address those things, you understand that. And then when you look at like an ADD or ADHD diagnosis, you've got usually really high functioning intelligence, but there's also a disconnect. So some aspects are low functioning, right? So like for me, I was diagnosed as ADD as a kid, and they wanted to give me Ritalin, and my mom's like, no, he's going to be busy, right? So I played 3 sports constantly. If I wasn't playing sports, if I wasn't insanely active, my grades sucked, and I was miserable. But if I was highly active, then I got straight A's in school. I didn't have a problem. And the fun part was, in school, like my teachers knew me because I grew up I was in a veterinary practice in a very small community. We had 99 kids in my class. And, so we would have fun with our teachers, or my teachers would try to have fun with me. And they realized that I was willing to say or do things that most kids were not. And, they're like, this one's a little bit unique. And I can remember a funny anecdote to this, so you can understand how the unique aspects of our minds work for these spectrum kids. Because my mom used to cut my hair, and because we didn't have money and we lived in the country, we didn't have a barber to go to, so she would cut my hair. She'd take the clippers that we had in the clinic and trim stuff up. She had a rule with me. It's like, if you move around in the chair, I'm taking it all off. right? Just sit still, which was a hard thing for me to do. Sit still, or I'm just going to take the zero blade and then you're going to be bald. So one time I didn't sit still. So she's like, all right, took it all off. I mean, down, so I was bald. So go to school the next day, stand at the bus stop, get on the bus. Bus driver looks at me. Everybody on the bus starts laughing. Bus driver's like, what happened to you? I'm like, I have leukemia.
Oh, no.
And they went. So I get to school, go to class, same thing. Everybody's laughing at me because I got no hair. Teacher's like, what happened to you? I'm like, I have leukemia. You remember, I grew up in a veterinary practice, so I knew. And this is before cancer was a sting. Back when I was a kid, cancer was a stigma. Like, if you had cancer, there was something wrong, and people didn't want to be near you. It was like with Ryan White when he had HIV. It's like, oh my God, don't touch the toilet seat. So people are like, oh my, what? You have leukemia? Phone call. So they're like, principal gets a phone call. My mom gets a phone call. And the principal's like, does Clay have leukemia? She's like, what are you talking about? She's like, he lost his hair. He said he has leukemia. She's like, no, I shaved his head last night. And you go, oh my God, that's funny. You know, so the interesting part of the mind of us that are high functioning is we see things differently. But there's also aspects of the way that we function that are lower. So you can look at that spectrum and you can see where you fall in some areas and where you fall in others, because it's not an absolute. Like Christina is an idiot savant. So she is the far right, top right corner, as high as you're going to get. But in some aspects, in her spatial awareness, doesn't exist. She doesn't know where she put her phone. She can set her phone right here. And we'll be having a conversation. And in 2 minutes, she'll go, I can't find my phone. I'm like, babe, it's right there.
It's like my mom. She calls me and she's like, I can't find my phone. I'm like, you're on your phone.
Either you're talking to me on your watch and you can ping it, or it's in your ear right now. Like, I think we're good on this one. I got you. So in understanding that, and it actually corresponds to why I wear these. Because we were in Slovenia, and one of our collaborating docs over there, she's the top functional medicine doctor that I've ever met. And she has a specialty in the spectrum. Because her daughter was vaccine injured when she was 2. And was seven years old when we were over there initially. And so she built her entire career on trying to help her daughter. And we did some cool stuff to get her daughter like doing amazing. So I was over in the lab with her, and she's like, you diagnosed as ADD? I'm like, of course I was. Look at me. Yeah. She's like, well, come here. So we go into her brain lab, and she says, I want to do some stuff with you. I want to put you through a couple tests. And she's like, do you know you're left brain dominant? So if you're high functioning, like most of us are, ADD, ADHD, in that realm, we're left brain dominant. So she's like, blue lenses, not blue light blocking, but just blue lenses will actually balance your right brain with your left brain.
That's
with
crazy.
Your left brain. She's like, here. So she just put some blue lenses over my eyes, and she's like, look. And in like 30 seconds of putting lenses on the first time, I was like, whoa, this is cool. And I'm like, well, I'm going shopping now. She's like, all you need is this kind of range of blue lenses, not anything special. It's like sunglasses.
So what has that changed for you?
You tell me.
Okay. How long do I have to wear them for?
No, just a couple of seconds. Your brain will adjust. Feel like it softens things a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's not so bright, but it just smooths things out, and when they just look cool.
Yeah.
People are like, why do you wear those? I'm like, well, they're function and not just fashion.
Yeah.
But
so what would you do if you were right brain dominant?
I have no idea. I've never been there. But I think it's red that will balance left brain with right brain, and I think it was red. So some people that wear red lenses are more right brain dominant. But understanding the process, and there's an interesting aspect. So when you look at that spectrum, right, and I'll make sure you get that, because the boys were just cutting it up. They were just working on it. There's an extra box that's not part of the entire spectrum. And in that box, it sits aside from the rest of humanity, are narcissists, psychopaths, and sociopaths. So they're not part of society. They don't function within that. But you know what they do?
What?
They feed on it. Right? So they're predatorial. right? And they will feed on the strengths and weaknesses. So what's interesting is because of the travels that we've had in some of our relationships, if you hear people talk about musicians and artists and actors that they've been controlled, right? They sold their souls in some aspects. Knowing many now and talking with them, it's not true.
What is it?
They're controlled by psychopaths and sociopaths. So I'll use an example. You know who Tom Cruise is?
Yeah.
Right? One of the best known actors in the world. You know Tom Cruise is dyslexic?
No.
He's in the spectrum. So, can't read the way we normally read, doesn't learn the way that we normally learn. So he's got these skills, he's got these gifts, but he has these deficits. And what if you had these skills, but those deficits were something that someone said, don't worry, we got you. We'll take care of these things. We'll manage those things for you. Don't worry, we'll do this. All you have to do is do what we tell you. We'll take care of all your contracts. You're going to join this organization, and you're going to take 50% of what you make, and you're going to donate it here. And people start to look at it. It's like, oh, he's crazy. And eventually, over time, you might start to go crazy because you start feeling like you're have this influence over you that's not part of you. Look at Kanye, right? Kanye's freaking savant, right? But if you pay attention to him, away from all the chaos and craziness, you'll see that, oh, he's severely in this realm, but he's also low functioning in some areas, right? So if you look at the red carpet that just went on, I think it was the Oscars or the Grammys, and you want to understand that aspect of how he's low functioning in those areas, what man would ever bring his wife on a red carpet and have her dressed in something that covers nothing, absolutely naked, in a dress that's compressing stuff here, and has her take a coat off in front of the entire media that's going to be presented not just for a couple minutes, but for the rest of her freaking life. And if you noticed her face, if you've watched the videos, and most people have, because she's beautiful, so that caught some attention. But if you look at her face, when she turned around and she's facing cameras, no man in their right mind would ever put their wife in that environment. That lets you know that there's something off. Now, when it comes to lyrics and production and performance, freaking savant, right?
Yeah.
But there's a whole lot missing in other areas, and he's gone absolutely batshit because of who's controlling him and how that's been manipulated. But people are like, oh, he's crazy. He's sold his soul. From talking to artists and talking to some people that are celebrities and having relationships with them and getting to know them, I'm like, oh, that's not the case. These over here, yes, but it's not all. They're all being influenced. They're being controlled. Now, there might be a couple that are like, oh, I'll do this. Like, I'll use two examples. And now I can't confirm this, but did you watch the Super Bowl?
No.
Okay. The best part of this last Super Bowl happened 20 minutes before the Super Bowl started.
What was it?
Lady Gaga performing live, solo, on a piano on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. One of the most dynamic performances you're going to see. And she's a vocal talent that is off the freaking chart. Savant level vocal talent. But there's also aspects of her personality that don't coincide with that performance aspect. That's her gifts. There's people controlling her. That people look like, oh, she's doing this, she's doing these things. She's the one choosing. No, she's not. They're controlling that. So it's not her, it's who's controlling her. But you see the genius, you see the savant level of talent, the God-given gifts that resonate with all of us, and they're feeding on it. But they're not part of the spectrum with the rest of us. That's the problem that we're seeing in humanity.
So what can they do if they're being controlled?
Well, become our friends.
Yeah.
Start cleaning stuff up. Or eventually they're going to have a break. You know, you have the people that go absolutely batshit. They go nuts. They'll have this disconnect, right? You've seen that, you know, with many young celebrities in the last couple of years, right? Or older celebrities, some that are my age, that have this almost a psychotic break of going, they're controlling me, they're doing this, and then they're portrayed as being crazy because it's the psychopaths, the sociopaths, and these narcissists that are controlling all of that. So they're like, oh, if you try to go against what we control, we'll destroy you. We don't care about you. Because they don't have empathy. It doesn't exist. It's not even something that they care to even try to comprehend because it doesn't exist in them. So if their sole purpose is feeding on all of that talent, all of that energy, that's all you are, is a meat suit to them, because they don't give a damn about your soul other than what they can use it for.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I want to be used by God, please.
Right, and that's that aspect of community, of being able to, you know, to build relationships and understand influence, where you might not have direct influence on somebody, but being able to walk and teach and create that content, just like we're doing now in the conversations, that might resonate with somebody else and go, you know, bro, you need to watch this. You know, we'll cut it up into snippets and go, pay attention to that. You got a 2-minute, you know, segment of your attention span. It's like, yo, yay, they're talking shit about you, and you watch it and go, that's me, and they're actually not talking shit.
Yeah.
But that's kind of it. It's this little segment. It's not the spectrum. It's the whole thing. But that's what happens when you're ADD and ADHD and you don't look at it the same way.
Yeah. That reminded me. Can you explain a little bit about your saying of create greatness?
So what are we made in the image of?
God.
Who is?
The creator.
And?
Great.
Right?
Yeah.
So if we're made in his image, right, and he made Christ to be the example of what we are, because he's greatness, right? What's our job?
To become
Christ. Great.
Yes.
Because that's who we're made to become. Same reason we put a cross in the middle of the logo, right? And the cool part is being able to see that in aspects of life and people and animals. You know, it's understanding who you are, right? Especially, you know, if you're younger, you have to understand that, you know, part of the process is the journey. There's some things that people should never go through. We should never, you know, have to deal with pedophiles. You should never have to deal with being raped or anything like that. Those things are not part of the process. Everything else is part of the journey, right? And, you know, those are the things that make you. And, you know, the one aspect that I've tried to teach, you know, my kids is, if you look at, you know, one of the most dangerous, renowned weapons of all time is the katana, or the samurai sword.
What is that?
It's a Japanese sword that's all the ninjas and samurai have and use. It's virtually indestructible. And if someone if you're a police officer and someone's got a sword, they got a samurai sword, and they're within 20 to 30 feet of you, you can shoot them a couple times, they're going to kill you. And they know that. And that's why if you have a knife, side note, if you do something stupid and you pull a knife and the cops are having a conversation with you and like, hey, you need to calm down, you're causing a problem, maybe you're causing a little bit of a ruckus, and you pull a knife out, they will shoot you. Because it's known that if you're within 20 to 30 feet of someone with a knife and you got a gun, the time it takes for you to pull and squeeze a few times and maybe put them down, they'll have enough time to stab you multiple times and they will kill you. But this sword, this virtually indestructible weapon that has killed more people in history probably than almost any other weapon, is made from this really unique process that you take raw steel and you throw it in the fire and you heat it up to where it's almost molten, and you take it out and you just start pounding on it, and you throw it back in the fire and you heat it up again, and you take it out of the fire and you pound on it some more, and then you throw it back in the fire and you take it out and you start grinding on it and you pound on it some more and you throw it back in the fire. And through this process, one of two things happens. it's either forged into something that is absolutely amazing, or it breaks and you start over. So we live in a trial by fire, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have to understand that those things that you think are adversity, those things that are challenges, those things that you don't get your way, the days that you think you have trials and tribulations, it's just part of being thrown in the fire. Mm-hmm. And it's part of that forging process that's going to make you who God intends you to be. Mm-hmm. And only going through that process is going to allow you, one, to have the appreciation of what you went through, because without having experience, what can you teach?
Nothing.
Right? Because you have no frame of reference.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What do you know? Well, I know nothing. I've gone through nothing. I've studied nothing. So I have nothing to share here. Well, mm-hmm. if the second principle is teach, well, where do you learn what you're supposed to teach? Well, your walk, your journey.
So I'm always so grateful for all the things that I've been through and all the mistakes that I've made, because if I didn't have those, I wouldn't be able to, I would have no credibility.
You have no credibility. You have no frame of reference, mm-hmm. right? And the most important thing is to fail forward, right? One of the things that I hate with what's going on with kids now in sports and competition is people get participation awards. Mm-hmm. If you suck, you lose. Get better, right?
They don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
Yeah, and guess what? The rest of life is going to hurt your feelings, mm-hmm. because that's the world we live in. But if you fail, and you should, if you're going to be successful, you're going to learn to fail a lot, and mm-hmm. you're going to appreciate it because you're going to learn from it, and you're going to continue to fail forward, right? Failure is not a setback. It's an opportunity to reflect and go, okay, that didn't work. How do I need to change this, or what can I do to do it better the next time? Mm-hmm. You can apply that to sports. You can apply it to writing. You can apply it to interviews, broadcasting, any aspect of life, art. You think the greatest artist in the world you think Picasso just said, I'm gonna knock these first 100 paintings mm-hmm. out, and they're gonna be perfect, and I'm the guy.
The only way to grow is to fail.
Yeah.
You stay the same.
It's to experiment.
Otherwise.
It's like cooking, right? You start cooking, the first few times you make something, it's probably going to suck. Mm-hmm. Or it could be good the first time, you're like, tinker with this. I don't like that flavor when it came out. So it's just a matter of understanding and appreciating the process and going through it. And don't be afraid to fail. Just own it.
And God works everything out for our good. So
yeah. And because we're in His hands. Mm-hmm. Or is it her?
Pretty sure it's him.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Because it's interesting with the English language. There's only one God, right?
Mm-hmm.
That means it's actually she. Because if anyone can do it, it can be he. But if there's only one person that can do it, it's actually feminine.
I can't comprehend that.
I know, right? It's kind of crazy. But that's English.
Yeah.
That's the English language.
Mm-hmm.
But the basis didn't come from English. It came from Aramaic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. It's all in interpretation and translation.
I would love to be in your brain sometime.
Oh, don't. It's convoluted. Sometimes it's empty and quiet, but not often.
Okay, I have one last question. So clearly you're very successful as a husband, as a father, as an entrepreneur. I was just wondering, do you have any secrets to success that you could share with us, or tips?
We just hit on a lot of them.
Yeah.
Fail a lot. Take the time to understand who you are, right? And the worst thing you can think is that you deserve anything in this world. You deserve absolutely nothing, mm-hmm. right? And my mom grew up in an affluent household, and my grandfather, her dad, is the only one surviving of all my grandparents, and there's a big trust fund that is going to be passed down to my mom and her 4 siblings, and then the 22 grandkids, or no, 17 grandkids. And my parents taught me growing up that, like, if you expect to get anything, you'll get nothing. Mm-hmm. Just know going in. Because if you think you're going to get something just because of being here, no, you will be left wanting. And so figure out what your gifts are, what your skills are, and then figure out how you can be of service to others, to humanity. And then, through that process, you'll figure out how you can apply that in the world and how you can work to create value in doing what you're doing. And in most instances, that's not entrepreneurial. 95% of people shouldn't be an entrepreneur. It's they don't have the fortitude, they don't have the stomach, they're not made to take the hits the way that most entrepreneurs do. I mean, it's the one thing with business owners or entrepreneurs that achieve some semblance of really, really high success, and people look at them and go, oh my God, they have that, I want to be like that. I don't think you could stomach the things that they went through in order to get there if they were really self-made. Like, you can talk with your dad about this and he'll go, I don't know if I would wish some of my experiences on my daughter. Right? They're like, you appreciate, the benefits of it, but most of us aren't made for it. But we live in such a unique world that there's so many opportunities to create value in so many different aspects of life, and that we are each unique. And when you own your uniqueness, and you understand that the more you work to develop your own skill set, the more you're going to find and understand your value. And you have to value your value. I think that's the most important thing, because at some point there's going to be a price and a cost put on the value that you create. Why is it that one artist can charge $50 million for a painting and another charges $100?
The value.
But whose value?
The artist.
Right? It's the
work,
value that they've put on their work that then is personified by how others perceive them on what they'll pay for that work. And so if you're confident in yourself and confident in what you are, who you are, and what you do, you're going to be valued. But if you don't value yourself, you're going to be valueless. And so, being young, you can be aggressive now because of technology and everything else. I mean, there's opportunities. There's a difference between making money and being successful, right? You can make a lot of money doing a lot of different things, but in most instances, you talk to people that have just worked to make money, they'll tell you that that's not success, right? Those other things of, being a parent, being a father or being a dad, which are two separate things, because I'm not a father, I'm a dad, right? My ex-wife had 2 abortions and took that away from me. One, I knew. I didn't know about the second one until I married my wife, and my mom told Christina that, she'd actually had 2.
Oh my gosh.
So you get to appreciate different things in life, but the aspect of being present and in determining what success really means, because it's not just people see me as being influential or what they see socially. The real success is when you're at home and you're quiet, and if you're able to sit with your spouse and they still can tolerate you, and your kids will go, yeah, we want to hang out with you, and thank you for this or thank you for that. And that doesn't come until they're in their 30s, until they've got kids. But that's, and everybody's unique, so it's, don't look, well, I'll give you the 2 adages to the same explanation, because, and your dad's got, part of the poker business. Yeah. Right? So when you're sitting at a table, don't count someone else's chips. Right? You don't play someone else's hand. You don't count their chips. Don't worry about what anyone else has. Play that's your good. Hand, play your stack, because that's what you're in control of. So don't look at somebody else's life and judge yours based on what somebody else has, because you don't control it. You don't dictate it. They don't dictate you. They don't control anything that you have. Now, if you're around people that have attained a level of success that you admire or that you might also want to achieve, the most powerful thing that you can do is ask for help and be willing to say, hey, especially if you're young, for where you are and where your friends are, or hopefully people that are watching this, go intern. Go find the people that you see that are successful and go, how did you do that?
That's what I'm doing.
Can I work for free? Right? I will, and you get paid now.
Yeah.
Because if you create value, you will receive value. But go to the people that you know are successful. Go to successful entrepreneurs, because I will tell you, for people that are successful, if you have someone young come to you and say, hey, will you teach me? Can I intern with you? I want to learn, and I'll do whatever you want me to do. Will you teach me? The majority of people that are successful will say, absolutely. You know what? Because that's one of the best ways that we get to pay things back, right? Is to how we can give and teach the future. And so, really engage. Get off the damn phone and go to work, right? And because then you're going to find out how you can fit in. And don't be afraid to fail. Fail a lot. And one of the biggest places I fail is in my relationship. Yeah. And because it's that, and that's one of the life lessons is if you're going to have a relationship with another human being in a really tight, close, intimate relationship, and someone that you connect to, because you play with magnets. Yeah. Okay. So you understand magnetism. And if you have a wall magnet and you put it on a fridge, you can move it around pretty easily. Or if you have two wall magnets and you go positive side and a negative side, they'll stick, but you can move them, you can pull them apart. Right? And if you do put a positive and a positive, they'll repel one another. They'll push against one another, but you can pretty much stick them together. And you can feel that they don't quite fit, but you can force them to stay together, even though that they don't fit. There's a lot of relationships that are like that, especially in Williamson County. But if you take two rare earth magnets and you take a positive and a positive, they will repel each other out here, and you can't push them together. But if you flip them over and you do positive and negative and bring them together, they're inseparable, and you can't pull them apart. But if you work with that magnetism, that strength and energy between the two, you can power a freaking city with that level of electromagnetism and being able to spin it and such. So that amount of power is really, really important. But when you have two poles like that, two insanely strong magnets of two personalities, you're not always going to see the same, right? You're not always going to agree. There's going to be friction. There's going to be disagreements. And that's not where you quit. That's where you go. If you're a guy, you say, I allowed you to be correct. Because it's really hard for us to say, I was wrong. Yeah. It's like, I'm giving you the win on this one. Yeah, you're correct. But, that aspect of knowing that when you have that partner, it's the most valuable thing that you can have, because your success is going to be predicated on who you have with you. So find that partner, and the rest comes, or work your ass off to become your best self, business, life, spiritually, and eventually that person will come around and you'll go, you're different. Wait a minute. I know these things. Yeah. And then there you go.
Well, the Bible says you should marry someone that you would go to war with. So I feel like that lines up exactly with what you're saying.
Well, and a lot of times when you say you go to war with, you'd think, oh, we're going to go into battle together and we're going to go against this. Sometimes you're going to war with that person. You're going, wait a minute, I don't know if I can handle that. It's like, exactly, you're so in love with that person, that that creates this level of heat and friction and frustration and anger sometimes. You're like, God, I hate you, but I love to hate you. And the difference between love and like are two different things, right? And it's like with my wife, love is always there, right? It's infinite. It's crazy. She doesn't always like me. I don't always like her. But we always have that compass and that foundation that's always there. And that's that core. I got to see that in my parents. It was really interesting because one of my friends that she became a veterinarian, she interned in the clinic when we were younger, and then went to veterinary school and came back and worked for my parents. And I was talking to her after I left, and was back here, and she's like, "You ever see your parents fight at home?" I'm like, "Nope, not once." And this is true. My parents never argued, never fought in front of us. She's like, "You should see them at work."
Oh no.
Because they went at each other in the office. Right?
Yeah.
But as soon as they were home, they're like, put that away. That's in the. As soon as you lock the door to the clinic, that shit's there, right? Everything else is like, okay, that's all locked up. Let's go BS.
You got good parents.
Yeah. So it's part of that journey. Yeah. So love it, learn from it, fail through it, go with it.
Well, I've definitely learned a lot from you today, and I'm sure that everybody else is going to learn a lot too.
I've learned a lot too, and I'm glad that we've already learned that fashion in Nashville involves corduroy. 'Cause
I guess so.
Fashion keeps coming back.
Yeah. So that's all for today at the Barn. Thank you guys so much for listening, and thank you, Clay, for joining us. Jesus loves you, and so do I.
Me too.